Say yes every day to the world and to your heart. Open up your eyes and let your spirit start. Say yes to the dreams you hold inside. Let your soul be your guide.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Wednesday Wisdom. Today, we are joined by the fabulous Bill Foss, and he is a breakthrough strategist. So we certainly cannot wait for his insights. Bill, first off, thank you so much for joining us today. And on Wednesday Wisdom, what we like to do is kind of go in the past, to the present, and then into the future. So let's kick us off with Bill, please share with us what was a piece of advice or some insights that you received early in your career that you would like to share with us? And please also, if it was from an individual, let's give them a shout out.
That's awesome. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here, inviting me to be here. I'm excited about this opportunity. And to get right to it, the first really impactful individual was Ron Ledger. I went to school with his daughter, Carol, and Ron had an office in the basement of his home. They had a split level home. It was a beautiful office. But what I didn't know initially is Ron was one of the #1 insurance salespeople in the country, not just for his company, but in the insurance industry. I mean, he was just a stellar performer. And when I opened my real estate brokerage eventually, I invited him to speak for my company and help train my agents because I could see he obviously had a model for success that was incredible. And he had some rules that I followed. And one was, if you're on time, you're late. Dress for the position that you're looking for to attain. So always dress slightly ahead or above the people and the places that you want to be. And he also was a consummate professional, meaning he knew his product inside and out. He was expert. But the other part of it was I was raised in a family that believed in jobs, security. Everybody had followed the typical path. But I was different. I never wanted to do that. I never wanted a job. I felt that it just wasn't who I was. So Mr. Ledger held out for me a different model from what I was being raised in. So we ended up becoming great friends. He actually wanted to sell me his business eventually. And that's how much of an impact he had on me. It's just understanding what a consummate professional is and what it takes. And that was the first opportunity I had for a model to do that.
Wow, so many things that you just said there that we can unpack, right? And as you're speaking, I'm like, wow, these are like basic lessons that, if you follow them, it will lead you to success. Let's take the first one about if you're on time, you're late. Sounds so simple, but yet what does that immediately show people? Right? When you're early, when you're there, when you're prepared, when you're dressed for success and for the part that you're looking for, not necessarily where you are today, but where you're going. And it leads me to, I was actually sharing with you that I recently was in New Orleans and my plane kept getting delayed. And I sat down next to a gentleman and we were having an entire conversation about how his company, which was a bank, right? It was a national bank. And he was saying that they are told as executives that when you get on an airplane, number one, you have to speak to the person next to you. If it's a business professional, not like a family, but if it's a person that's there for business, because you never know if you can get business from them. And number two, you better be dressed professionally because people are evaluating you and making decisions based on that. And just because you're on an airplane, you shouldn't dress down or look different than if you were going to a business meeting. So those couple of things. And then, of course, honing in on your craft, knowing the ins and outs of every aspect of your business, not just the things within those four walls. So I'd love to also hear from you, Bill, in regards to some of the things that Ron did. I mean, to be a number one or top insurance agent nationally is a big deal. That is a very, very big deal. Would you also attribute that to his relationships, like ability to form relationships, or was it his follow through? What else was it that made him that ultimate success?
It's yes. This is
all of the above.
I have a few gray hairs, and so this was pre-computer CRMs and databases. He had a row of Rolodex files, if anybody remembers Rolodex, little card files, and you'd flip through them and they'd be alphabetized. He had, I don't know, 3 or 4 big Rolodex files. He had a systematic methodology for follow-up that he designed that worked for him. So these are all the little insights, substantial insights I gained as our relationship grew through the years. And we lost touch several years ago, but the answer is yes, all of those. He was a networker. I mean, I was just somebody who knew his daughter, and eventually we became, much more than just what's the word I'm looking for?
Mentor, mentee.
He sort of took me under his wing and saw something in me. So he reached the pinnacle in those areas because of what you're saying. But also, what is important is he was willing to give. I mean, that's a key. He didn't just take. He gave of his knowledge. He gave financially. He was contributing to his church. I mean, he was a giver as well. So he just was an amazing model. And I'm not sure if he knows how much of an impact he had, to be quite honest.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have a question popped into my mind as you were speaking. Do you think that in this day and age, in 2024 and beyond, do you think we almost rely on technology a little bit too much? Because yes, I grew up in the days of the big fat Rolodex also, even though, yes, there were CRMs, but it just wasn't as dynamic and didn't do all the bells and whistles that it does today. It was very simple. It was more like an Excel sheet, right? So I'm just curious of your opinion. Do you think we almost rely on it to do too much for us versus the methodology of really going through in a manual way? What are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree with that statement. As a matter of fact, up to the day I sold my brokerages, that I used to challenge agents. I would walk into a listing appointment with nothing but a notepad, and I'd come out with the listing before you with all your wizardry technology. And I absolutely agree. It's about understanding people, understanding the value proposition that you bring and that they require. And that's not technology. That's listening. That's being intuitive. That's being compassionate and empathetic. It's so much more than technology.
I agree. I completely agree. Those are some of the basic foundations that I have seen kind of fall by the wayside, and because it should be a healthy balance. We all agree there is fabulous, unbelievable technology that can assist us, but you can't lose sight of that basic human connection that goes along with it. Totally agree.
Well, that's what people struggle with, right, Laura? They get a CRM and there's these canned emails and canned responses, and it doesn't work for them. Well, it doesn't work for them because it's not them. They don't take the time to go create the relationship based on who they are and create the database to serve them in that way. And that's why there's a disconnect that happens.
Agree. Okay, so now you've learned all of these wonderful things. You've applied some of these things. I'd love to hear, how have you taken some of what you learned from Ron and other things, of course, through the years? How are you taking that and applying that to right now in 2024 and beyond?
Well, there, again, many, many lessons that I could tie into, but the biggest one was when he did offer the opportunity to take over his business. We talked about it and I came to understand the business. And while it offered residual income, for example, which was tremendous, it didn't feel right to me. And he taught me, Bill, if it doesn't feel right, you don't do it. It's not for you. It's not who you are. I see all of the attributes that you bring that I saw, but it has to work for you. And he graciously agreed that we wouldn't pursue it. But he taught me a lesson in that, and that was to follow who you are, and which is what the basis of all my coaching is. You know, your business has to serve your life and who you are. And if it doesn't, eventually something will break. And so that was a huge lesson for me, that while I saw the money and I saw the opportunity, it just didn't feel right. But he was such that he understood and helped me understand it's okay. Let's look at where you need to go and where you should go. And it was real estate. It was always real estate. So.
Wow. That what you just said there is probably one of the biggest pieces of wisdom you could share with anyone. And unfortunately, and I think you would agree with this, so many times we've seen people, depending on their situation, especially, I mean, we can certainly relate to this when you're starting out in your career, where you're trying to forge your path. You're looking towards, well, I need X amount to survive. I need X amount to fulfill what's going on in my life, whether it's growing a family, whether it's, moving to a certain area of the country. And so you go after chasing what you think will fulfill that, but it's not truly fulfilling to yourself. And some people don't even know what it feels like to truly be fulfilled. They've never actually experienced it. But for those of us that know when everything is clicking on all cylinders and that feeling you get when you're in that zone, it's magical. It certainly doesn't feel like work. It no longer feels like work. It is, you jump out of bed in the morning, just waiting to get started because it's your passion and it's where you are in the right spot. So what you just said, and of course, I know this is all based on your business and what you provide with being a strategist and teaching this to others, that is the ultimate wisdom for people within their professional lives.
It's a missing piece of our industries. When I say industries, real estate and mortgage, that we are all chasing the how-to and the what's next and how can I do more and better and faster. But it's not about the how-to. How-tos are unfulfilling. Money in and of itself is unfulfilling. Serving others is fulfilling for some, but some are doing it to get to the money. So, and there's so many layers to what we're talking about that if people would just take the time and step back and follow who they are and feel right about what they do and adapt what they learn to themselves rather than just, I think it was, I don't remember, it was Emerson or somebody that said, or it might have been, I forget, Walden Pond guy. Can't remember. But anyway, he said, to envy is ignorance, to imitate is suicide. And so many of us in our businesses are imitating the success of others, thinking that's the path, but it's not the path. It's only part of the path. It has to be resonant with who you are. Otherwise, it will end in some. I tell people all the time, I built a multi-million-dollar business that I came to despise, and I had the ladder up against the wrong wall and eventually sold that, but it created terrible collateral damage in the meantime because I was chasing something that wasn't aligned with me. So
yeah, and I can completely understand that. So for me, that's very clear that we could go down this path. For others, maybe they haven't recognized that yet, and of course, we've all watched Simon Sinek, with his TED Talk, and when he spoke about how he had the dream job and he had the position that he loved. And from the outside, people were like, what do you mean you're not happy? What do you mean you're not fulfilled? How can you possibly walk away from that? And he recognized that just wasn't lighting him up anymore. And as far as the imitation, I think we've had this conversation that I've also noticed that with social media, listen, I believe that as a business, we all need to utilize digital marketing and we all need to be part of social media. But in some instances, People are using that as comparing and trying to imitate. And again, it doesn't line up to being yourself, because when you're truly yourself, that's when you shine. And that's when people are attracted to your business and yourself, because they feel that, they can see that light. And so that's another, going back to the digital CRM versus the Rolodex.
Yeah, but it also ties back to the initial question. Mr. Ledger was kind enough to show me that's okay to go my own way. Again, even though my upbringing was jobs and careers, and they were all in accounting, by the way, and bookkeeping. I was the furthest thing from an accountant and bookkeeper, right? But he showed me that was okay to do that. And my parents didn't always think I was making the best choices. But then when it all began to click, it was like, I guess he's okay.
Well, it's scary, right? All you want is your children to be happy and fulfilled and have security, and know that they're going to be okay. And so sure, if you're thinking, wow, being an accountant and a bookkeeper, that's secure, that's safety, that's always going to be around, right? So yes, certainly can understand that. That's awesome. All right, Bill. Well, this conversation has been phenomenal, and we'd love to know, now, what's your piece of advice? What would you like to share with the audience of a piece of advice that you would like to give us?
Well, it all ties back to the same conversation, that most of us, or many of us, and I didn't figure this out till I was in my 50s, by the way, almost 60, that it's okay to be who you are, but you have to take the time to understand who you are and what floats your boat, what fulfills you. And most people don't really know, which we've already discussed. And if we would slow down to speed up, we would be well served. What I've discovered is that many in our industry, I'm a big fanatic about imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is a manifestation of many things, but one of them is trying to be someone you're not, authentic to yourself. And what I'm trying to get people in our industries to see is that if they would just take the time to find out who they are and what really their vision really is, their vision, not what they should be doing, ought to be doing, have to be doing, but really are desiring to do, and then create their business around that, they will be far more successful, far less stress. We have less burnout. We'll have less starting and stopping, which is a common problem, right? The roller coaster, they start following this path and then that path, and they
I
stop.
call it the shiny ball.
The shiny object, shiny lure, whatever you want to call it. Well, that's a symptom of a bigger underlying issue. The book, I can't remember who writes it. I want to say, I won't remember again. Gray hair, right? Ask who, not how. We're
yes, I know that book. That's a great book.
Yeah, it might have been Dan Sullivan or Hardy. I don't remember which. But anyway, the point being, in our industries, we're driven to learn more how to. No, that's not the place to start. The place to start is who we are, where we're going, and then decide what how-tos you need to fit into that model. That's what strategy is. A strategy is to get to an end result in a way that makes sense for you, and not necessarily based on industry standards and the economy and all of these things. We look at those, but it's really about what gets you up in the morning. What are you a genius at? Do more of that and less of the stuff that drags you down. And energetically, in the end, you end up accomplishing far more, even though you're doing less, if that makes any sense. So it's really about knowing who you are, accepting who you are, and stop beating yourself up and thinking you're not good enough or fast enough or smart enough or doing the right things. And we abuse ourselves because we're trying to fit into somebody else's vision of what success is in the mortgage or real estate industry. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
And surround yourself with people that are good at those things that you're
absolutely
not, right? That's a lesson that sometimes we don't realize it's okay to say, I'm not great at this particular thing, but man, I have an amazing team, or I can hire someone or a virtual assistant or something to fulfill those things that I'm not excellent
We
at.
could do a whole new session on this alone, right? But what we have to realize is we're benefiting them and the higher good by doing that. And we're freeing ourselves up to bring what we are and who we are to the market. That's genius. And it's simple,
Absolutely.
just not easy.
No, exactly. It's genius and simple, but not easy. Bill, this has been a phenomenal session. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights and for giving us your time and guidance today.
My pleasure. Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's always exciting to be on with you and your expertise. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Bill. Have a good one.